Good evening, George Will here. Breaking news tonight that could unravel the entire facade of the Sussex brand once and for all. We're not talking about whispers in palace corridors or gossip from disgruntled ex-staffers. We're talking about hard evidence, federal documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice, alleging that Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, received a staggering $10 million from an anonymous source tied to Saudi Arabia, and the accusations don't stop at a mysterious wire transfer. They delve into money laundering, fraud, illicit transactions, and even the establishment of illegal services that could implicate her in a web of international crime. According to these explosive documents, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request and declassified just this week, the funds were funneled through a labyrinth of offshore accounts, shell companies, and cryptic intermediaries. This isn't a charitable donation or a legitimate business deal gone sour. This is, as the filings describe it, a deliberate scheme to legitimize dirty money while building a personal empire on the backs of shadowy dealings. Tonight, we expose the trail of deception that federal investigators say points straight to Meghan's door. And we'll show you why this revelation has her reportedly scrambling for damage control, because when the feds release documents like these, subpoenas follow, and subpoenas uncover everything. Here's what the documents allege, and I'm quoting directly from the executive summary. Between April 2023 and September 2025, the subject, identified as Meghan Markle, received approximately $10 million in unstructured payments from an anonymous donor linked to Saudi Arabian financial networks. These funds were routed through multiple jurisdictions, including the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and the United Arab Emirates, in a manner consistent with money laundering operations. The allegations go further, claiming that Meghan used these funds to establish unauthorized financial services, fraudulent investment vehicles, and illicit transaction channels that violated U.S. banking laws, IRS regulations, and international anti-money laundering protocols. But let's break this down step by step, because the devil is in the details, and these documents provide plenty of them. The feds didn't just stumble upon this. Their investigation stems from a broader probe into Middle Eastern influence operations in Hollywood and nonprofit sectors, triggered by suspicious wire transfers flagged by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. What emerges is a portrait of calculated ambition masked as philanthropy, where $10 million buys more than silence, it buys complicity. Let's start at the beginning, with the money itself. The federal documents detail a series of wire transfers totaling exactly $10,245,000, broken into irregular installments to evade detection. The first tranche, $2, $5 million, hit an account linked to Archwell Foundation in April 2023, classified as a humanitarian grant from an unnamed Saudi philanthropic entity. But investigators say this was no grant, it was the opening salvo in a laundering scheme. Quoting from page 17 of the report, the initial transfer originated from a Riyadh-based holding company with ties to Saudi sovereign wealth funds, but was rerouted through a Cayman Islands trust controlled by intermediaries known for facilitating anonymous donations. Why anonymous? Because the ultimate source, per the docs, is a high-level Saudi figure whose identity is redacted but described as having significant influence in regional politics and energy sectors. Cross-referencing with public records, this matches profiles of individuals close to the Saudi royal family, known for using philanthropy as a cover for influence peddling. The documents include transaction logs showing how the money bounced like a pinball from Riyadh to a Swiss bank, then to a UAE intermediary, and finally into U.S. accounts under Archwell's umbrella. Each hop added a layer of obfuscation, with fees siphoned off to consultants who investigators allege were straw men. One particularly damning exhibit is a redacted email chain where a Meghan associate reportedly acknowledges the funds as discreet support for global initiatives, but internal notes flag it as high risk due to source opacity. Why Saudi Arabia? The docs suggest a quid pro quo rooted in Meghan's pre-royal connections. Investigators reference her 2018 receipt of diamond earrings from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, valued at over $500,000, which she wore publicly despite controversy over their blood money ties to the Khashoggi murder. This wasn't isolated. The report alleges it opened doors to deeper financial entanglements, where Saudi interests sought soft power in Hollywood through figures like Meghan. By September 2025, the full $10 million had landed, dispersed across personal, foundation, and production accounts. But here's the key: minimal reporting to the IRS, no disclosure in Archwell's public filings, and zero transparency on the donor. Federal auditors call this willful non-disclosure, the first red flag of fraud. Now, onto the core accusation, money laundering. The documents paint a vivid picture of how Meghan allegedly transformed this Saudi cash into clean assets. It's not amateur hour. Investigators describe a sophisticated operation using layered transactions to obscure origins. Per the report's forensic accounting section, the $10 million was laundered through a series of real estate flips, investment funds, and nonprofit disbursements designed to integrate illicit funds into legitimate streams. Exhibit B, 4 details, $3 million funneled into Montecito property renovations, classified as capital improvements but allegedly inflated to recycle cash. Contractors were paid in cash equivalents, with overages returned through rebates, classic laundering, 101. Another $2 million went to Archwell Productions, ostensibly for content development, but the docs claim it funded personal luxuries disguised as business expenses. Think private jets to networking events in the Gulf, where Saudi contacts were courted. One transaction, $750,000 wired to a Dubai-based media consultant, who then kicked back $500,000 to a U.S. account under American Riviera Orchard, Meghan's lifestyle brand. Investigators used blockchain analysis to trace portions converted to cryptocurrency, then back to fiat through unregulated exchanges, a method popular for evading sanctions. The report notes, these crypto conversions align with patterns seen in Saudi-linked evasion of U.S. sanctions on energy deals. It's alleged the anonymous donor used this to park proceeds from questionable oil trades, with Meghan's entities serving as the wash cycle. To build their case, feds subpoenaed bank records showing unusual patterns, inflows from high-risk jurisdictions, outflows to personal vendors like jewelers and spas. One example, $150,000 donated to a Saudi-affiliated charity, only to loop back as a grant to Archwell. This circular flow, per the docs, screams laundering intent. Fraud is the next pillar, and the documents are merciless here. They allege Meghan knowingly misrepresented the fund's nature to regulators, banks, and even her own team, creating a cascade of deceptive statements that could constitute multiple felony counts. Starting with IRS filings, Archwell's 2023 to 2025 Form 992 list the $10 million influx as generic, unrestricted donations from domestic sources, but investigators insist this deliberately omitted the foreign and high-risk Saudi-linked origin, violating not only disclosure rules under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, but also basic tax honesty requirements for nonprofits handling international money. Quoting directly from page 42 of the executive summary, the subject provided materially false statements on IRS Form 990, claiming domestic sourcing for funds that originated in high-risk foreign jurisdictions, thereby committing tax fraud and enabling improper deductions. This sleight of hand allegedly allowed massive tax write-offs on what were effectively personal lifestyle expenses, including a documented $400,000 wardrobe allocation that investigators tie to modifications and custom fittings on Saudi-gifted jewelry pieces, cross-referenced with vendor invoices and social media appearances where the items were prominently displayed at non-charity events. The deception doesn't stop at taxes. Bank fraud allegations surfaced through credit and loan applications where the incoming funds were presented as stable, legitimate endowment capital. The report details a $1.5 million revolving line of credit secured from a major California institution in mid-2024, backed by verified investment holdings that forensic tracing shows loop directly back to the routed Saudi tranches. When bank compliance officers later requested source of funds documentation, responses were reportedly vague or delayed, triggering internal flags for potential wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Affidavits from 2 former Archwell finance staff, names redacted but described as having direct knowledge, claim they were instructed to prepare misleading summaries for lenders, emphasizing philanthropic growth while burying the opaque foreign inflows. Partners were allegedly misled too. In pitch decks and contract addendums for Netflix and Spotify renewals, references to secured international backing and significant foundation reserves painted a picture of robust, transparent support. Yet the federal filings suggest these descriptions concealed the true illicit-tinged source, effectively defrauding commercial partners who rely on clean funding narratives for their own compliance and investor relations. A particularly revealing redacted internal memo from a top Hollywood talent agency, dated early 2025, warns executives of escalating reputational and legal exposure from Gulf region financial entanglements, yet the deals proceeded with the funds still flowing. This pattern of half-truths and omissions, per the documents, wasn't accidental oversight. It's portrayed as a calculated strategy to sustain the illusion of self-made success while the Saudi cash quietly propped up the operation. When layered together, these misrepresentations form what prosecutors call a web of deceit designed to shield both the money and the lifestyle it funded from scrutiny. Delving deeper, the documents expose a series of illicit transactions that allegedly greased the wheels of the entire scheme. These aren't innocent oversights or clerical errors. They're described in painstaking detail as deliberate violations of U.S. export controls, anti-corruption statutes, and international banking transparency rules. Key Exhibit A, 7, a $1. 2 million payment wired in 3 installments during late 2023 and early 2024 to a Riyadh-registered strategic advisory firm for purported services on Archwell's global cultural outreach initiatives. Investigators, however, classify this as a thinly veiled kickback to the same intermediaries who facilitated the original $10 million transfer, breaching the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, by providing value to foreign officials or their proxies in exchange for favorable treatment and continued funding access. Redacted wiretap transcripts and email chains capture oblique references to mutual strategic alignment and long-term partnership incentives, language the feds interpret as code for influence trading in both media and philanthropic spheres. Another $800,000 tranche flowed to a cluster of UAE-based technology and innovation startups in 2024, billed as seed investments for Archwell-aligned digital wellness projects. But the report alleges these entities were little more than shell vehicles designed to obscure onward transfers, with portions allegedly rerouted to data aggregation firms that traded anonymized donor information from Archwell campaigns in exchange for Saudi intelligence or market insights, conduct that would violate U.S. privacy laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, and potentially cross into illicit data brokering territory. The documents include blockchain traces showing cryptocurrency conversions of these sums, a technique frequently employed to dodge sanctions monitoring on energy-related proceeds. Eyewitness accounts in the filings reference discrete yacht-based meetings off the Monaco coast in summer 2024, where senior Archwell representatives allegedly finalized terms for a $2 million additional tranche. These encounters, documented via geolocation pings and vessel manifests, are said to have included discussions of promoting Saudi Vision 2030 reform narratives within future media content, unreported advocacy that could trigger unregistered foreign agent obligations under FARA. Photos from adjacent events show Meghan at nearby high-profile gatherings during the same window, fueling speculation of direct involvement. None of these transactions appear in public Archwell disclosures or IRS filings, rendering them outright illicit under multiple U.S. statutes. The cumulative effect, according to the investigative narrative, was to create a shadow pipeline of favors, cash, and influence that benefited personal branding while skirting every legal safeguard meant to prevent exactly this kind of foreign entanglement in American nonprofits and entertainment. Perhaps the most shocking element, allegations that Meghan used portions of the Saudi funds to establish and operate illegal services without required licenses or oversight. The federal documents claim she effectively created unauthorized financial conduits, functioning as an unlicensed money services business, MSB, in violation of FinCEN registration mandates under the Bank Secrecy Act. Central to this is a so-called philanthropic impact investment vehicle housed under Archwell's umbrella, which the report says accepted the routed Saudi capital and then extended bridge loans and micro grants to select Hollywood creatives, independent producers, and wellness entrepreneurs, charging arrangement fees as high as 12%, well above legal usury thresholds in California and constituting unlicensed lending. Exhibit C9 details how this vehicle funneled roughly $8 million into at least 7 recipient projects between 2024 and 2025, with repayment terms structured to recycle capital back into Archwell-controlled accounts, creating a closed-loop remittance system that evaded standard reporting. The docs label this an illegal remittance service, as funds were moved cross-border to overseas partners without proper AML, KYC protocols, or MSB licensing, potentially aiding tax evasion and sanctions circumvention for the original donor network. Further, investigators allege the creation of informal consultancy networks that connected Saudi high-net-worth individuals to American media and nonprofit opportunities, brokering introductions, deal structuring, and narrative alignment without any FARA registration as foreign agents. Fees collected, totaling around $500,000 in documented success payments, were allegedly laundered back as personal consulting income or foundation reimbursements. One redacted organizational chart shows a tiered structure of advisors and liaisons operating outside formal Archwell payroll, with communications routed through encrypted apps to minimize traceability. The report emphasizes that these services weren't peripheral. They formed a deliberate shadow infrastructure to monetize access, turning charitable goodwill into a for-profit influence machine. By operating without licenses, disclosures, or regulatory filings, the setup allegedly exposed participants to civil and criminal liability while shielding the true scale of foreign involvement. If substantiated, this could trigger not only FinCEN penalties but also potential RICO considerations for a patterned enterprise of financial misconduct. The portrait that emerges is one of ambition untethered from legality, where Saudi millions didn't just fund projects, they built an illicit parallel financial ecosystem designed to perpetuate power and privilege indefinitely. Why is this federal bombshell an absolute existential crisis for Meghan Markle? Because when the Department of Justice declassifies documents of this magnitude, the next step is rarely quiet negotiation. It's subpoenas, grand jury summons, and very real criminal exposure. Sources with direct knowledge of the situation report that Montecito has been in full lockdown mode for weeks. Lawyers are flying in daily. Crisis PR teams have been activated around the clock, and Meghan is reportedly in a state of near constant meetings, poring over every line of the released filings, desperately searching for a way to contain the damage before it metastasizes. The panic is palpable for a very simple reason. These aren't civil allegations that can be quietly settled with a check. These are federal findings that allege violations of money laundering statutes, 18 U.S.C., Section 1956, wire fraud, 18 U.S.C., Section 1343, tax evasion, and potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Conviction on even one count carries years in federal prison, multi-million-dollar fines, and forfeiture of any assets traceable to the illicit funds. That means the Montecito mansion, the private jet hours, the designer collections, even portions of Archwell's endowment could be seized by the government. Prince Harry is not untouched. The documents repeatedly reference joint accounts, co-signed trusts, and shared financial decision-making. Sources say he has been kept deliberately at arm's length from the most sensitive transactions, but ignorance is a razor-thin defense when you live in the house bought with laundered proceeds, fly on the planes funded by dirty money, and benefit from the lifestyle built on it. Insiders report tense, late-night conversations in which Harry is being forced to confront an impossible choice, stand by his wife and risk being dragged into the legal vortex, or begin distancing himself publicly, which would shatter the united front narrative they've spent years cultivating. The emotional toll is already showing. Friends describe Meghan as visibly shaken, sleeping little, and fixated on worst-case scenarios. Archwell staff have been instructed to preserve every email, every expense report, every donor list, because federal forensic accountants are coming, and they will leave no ledger unturned. This is no longer about reputation management. This is about survival. This Saudi-linked scandal is not happening in isolation. It is the match that could ignite an already smoldering financial powder keg. The federal documents do not exist in a vacuum. They are already being studied line by other creditors, private lenders, tax authorities, and even foreign governments who may have their own claims against the Sussex financial empire. When one major player here, the U.S. Department of Justice, publicly declares that $10 million flowed through suspicious channels, every other party holding paper suddenly has legal justification to demand answers, repayment, or both. We already know of mounting pressure points. Unpaid contractors who renovated the Montecito estate have filed mechanics liens. Vendors for Archwell events and American Riviera orchard product shoots have gone public with complaints of bounced checks and broken promises. Private loans, some reportedly guaranteed by high-profile friends, are rumored to be in default. And then there are the Gulf creditors themselves. If the Saudi source ever expected repayment, influence, or favorable media coverage in exchange for the $10 million, they are now watching the same documents we are, and they may decide to call in their marker through back-channel demands or parallel legal action in international courts. A victory for the feds in any criminal or civil forfeiture proceeding would trigger immediate asset freezes, bank account seizures, and property liens. That single act would embolden every other creditor to file suit, knowing the heavy lifting of proving fraud and concealment has already been done. The domino effect could be catastrophic: forced liquidation of jewelry, art, vehicles, intellectual property rights, even future earnings from Netflix, Spotify, or speaking engagements. In the worst case cascade, Chapter 11 or Chapter 7 bankruptcy becomes not a possibility but an inevitability, and bankruptcy means total, humiliating transparency. Every wire transfer, every trust document, every offshore account laid bare in public court filings for the world to dissect. For Prince Harry, the stakes are personal and dynastic. Any suggestion that Diana's inheritance or his military pension could be touched would be politically radioactive in the UK. Yet staying silent risks joint liability under California community property law. The marriage, the brand, the Montecito dream, they all hang on a thread. So where does this leave Meghan Markle on the 5th of February 2026? Let's walk through the realistic paths forward with cold clarity. Scenario 1. Quiet settlement and full repayment. Meghan somehow produces $10 million plus penalties and legal fees, likely north of $13 million, and hands it over in exchange for the DOJ dropping its probe, but the money simply isn't there in liquid form. That means selling the Montecito estate, already encumbered, liquidating jewelry and art, cashing out future media residuals, or begging for a bailout from a billionaire ally willing to take the reputational hit. Any of those moves would scream financial desperation and demolish the narrative of independent success. Scenario 2. Full legal war. She contests every allegation, hires the most aggressive white-collar defense team money can buy, and forces the government to prove its case in open court. The problem? Discovery would be apocalyptic. Subpoenas for every bank statement, trust instrument, email, text message, and phone record. Depositions under oath. Forensic accountants crawling through years of transactions. The public would see everything, every questionable expense, every redacted Saudi contact, every time someone warned this looks bad. She might win a reduced charge or civil settlement, but the cost in money, time, and reputation would be incalculable. Scenario 3. Indictment and trial. If the DOJ believes the evidence is overwhelming, a grand jury returns charges. Federal prosecutors don't bring cases they don't intend to win. A trial would be wall-to-wall global media coverage, live courtroom sketches, leaked exhibits, witness testimony from former staff, financial experts, even Saudi intermediaries. Conviction means prison time, massive fines, and permanent destruction of the Sussex brand. Scenario 4. The nuclear option, bankruptcy coupled with plea negotiations, file for protection, liquidate what can be sold, negotiate a reduced criminal penalty in exchange for cooperation. It is the most humiliating path, but also potentially the only way to cap the bleeding and avoid decades behind bars. There is no clean exit. There is no scenario that preserves the illusion of wealth, independence, and moral authority. Now I turn it over to you. What do you think Meghan should do? Type settle if you believe she should scrape together the money and pay to make this disappear. Type fight if you think she should contest every allegation and dare the feds to prove it. Type bankruptcy if you believe the only realistic path is to declare insolvency and start over. Type plea if you think she should cut a deal with prosecutors and cooperate. If you value this kind of relentless, evidence-driven reporting, smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This story is moving fast, and more documents, more sources, more creditors are coming forward every day. American justice has fired the opening salvo. The question now is, who else will join the fight to reclaim their money or their pound of flesh? I'm George Will. Stay tuned.